Welcome to my channel. I'm Creative Katie. Today I have an art journal tutorial for you. It's part of the Napkins series. Here's a close-up of the finished page. I absolutely love how this turned out. So of course we are starting with a napkin, and this lovely napkin came from NINNYSNAPKINS.com. Check out the description box for a link and a discount code. So this napkin is called Peony, and it has these lovely peonies and these butterflies. There's some magnolias in here, and I'm going to use a section of it. Now, when you open up a napkin, you're going to notice that, sometimes you have four identical pictures in the four quadrants. Sometimes you have pairs. And in this case, we have pairs. The one with the blue butterfly, we have two of those and we have two of the other ones. Now, there are lots of elements. This napkin is wonderful because there are lots of individual elements, and you do not have to use the napkin as the artist has it, how they've composed the napkin. You can pick and choose which elements you want. And for me, when it comes down to choosing, sometimes I start and I have an idea. I'm thinking I'm going to use this section of it. And then once I get creating, I fine tune that thinking. But I do need to separate it from the napkin to be able to manipulate it on my page and to really get a good idea of where I want to go with it. So I was water cutting that napkin with a fine liner brush, and I've done that numerous times before. Now I want some interest in my background. So I have this stamp. It's called English Decoration, very vintage feel. And I'm going to use my black archival ink and I'm going to stamp across the entire background. I want bits and pieces of this script and the elements of this, the swirls that they have, to show through the napkin and through whatever else I'm going to do on this page. And I can isolate a section of this, like that floral comment or the swirl, if I want to bring that out. So I'm giving this a dry after just to set the archival ink, but it is permanent when done. Now I'm using TCW modeling paste here and this 12-inch stencil Happy Dandelions. And I love the motif. That flower looks very similar to the peony on the napkin. And so I want that texture, I want that element on there in two different ways. And I like to pair up a napkin and a stencil. And the Happy Dandelions stencil and the napkin peony make a good duo, as you're going to see. So I'm using a key card to put this on. Now, some of this you're going to know, that's where I'm going to put the napkin. So it's going to give texture to the napkin. So now that I am further along on the page, I'm deciding that I don't want all the pieces that I originally cut off. So I'm using my liner brush again, putting a very little bit of water and just letting it wet and then just ripping it. This gives that ripped edge that really disappears when you decoupage it on. And I've decided, because I put some stamp and interest in the background, I'm getting rid of some of this script. Now these little pieces, save them. Even if they're not identifiable, they add texture and color to other pages. So now I have this little element. I'm not sure if I'm going to layer this one on top. But I have some of that stenciling with that modeling paste right under that peony, and it's going to make that peony, the napkin peony, look texturized. So I've got my liquid matte medium from Liquitex. It's a Liquitex basic brand, but there's also a professional brand, and I'll link those in the description box below, along with the stencils. The napkins and 6-inch TCW stencils can be purchased at Ninny's Napkins. There's also the TCW Shopify link below. So I'm putting the liquid matte medium underneath and then on top, and I'm using a brush that is soft. The napkin gets very fragile when wet, and I don't want to rip it. So I'm really liking the look. I like the vintage look from that English decoration stamp, and I'm liking the texture there. I'm quite happy with the decisions I've made. Now I'm coming to colorize the background, and some of that background was blue. I pick out that blue that's in that butterfly, and I'm putting it on, taking it off, and I'm trying to get it in between on the napkin so that it looks like there's sky throughout. This is where you're altering the napkin art and making it your own, making it part of your composition. And if you do it right, you won't see where the napkin begins and your mixed media piece, begins and ends, right? And I'm mixing colors and adding a little bit of white gesso and putting it on, taking it off. I don't want this to look flat. I don't want it to look one tone. I want differences, just like you would get in the sky. You get different shades. And I just build up the color till I like what I see. I am watering down this acrylic paint a little bit. And when you start adding color to your background, made it very light, and then I'm building up the depth of color as I go. It's easier to add more. It's a lot harder to take off. Now I was going to put the color through the stencil for the flowers, and then I decided to do it in a different way. So here's me attempting to put the pink through the stencil. And that's okay, but I really didn't like that effect. So I'm going with plan B, and I'll put a link to a video where I've done this. Now this is white gesso, and I'm painting over the entire part, even the in between parts. And the gesso is going to give me a good base to add color. There, and this is the video that I will put a link to. So I'm basically filling in the entire shape, even the crevices. Because I don't want to see the distinct separation of all those pieces. Yeah, I'm not sure if you can tell in the picture, but you can see some of that stamping that I did. It's coming through the napkin. Just adding that little extra something. I've been collecting lately a lot of vintage stamps and stencils to create some vintage feel pieces. If you'd like a video showing some of my top selections, leave me a comment below. And while I'm continuing to do this, if you haven't followed me on Instagram, go to Instagram and follow me at Creative Katie. Often I post works in progress. Now I wanted some of that pink from the peony to be in the background. I wanted to make everything look like it was one cohesive piece. So again, I'm adding and then taking off and adding and taking off. So now I'm taking some of the quinacridone magenta, alizarin crimson, some white gesso, just kind of globbing it on my brush really, and just very painterly painting in the stenciled happy dandelions, which on here, because we have the peonies, are going to look like peonies or other flowers. It's abstract. It doesn't have to be exact. I want to catch some of the same colors, the lights and darks that the napkin has. You can see I'm just kind of dabbing the paint there. I'm not trying to paint each petal very meticulously. I'm even holding the brush a little bit looser. I want some darks, I want some lights. I love how some of that modeling paste just, some of it's behind the napkin and the rest of it's there and I can use it. It's like peeking through. So it's just like if I was looking out my back door and in my garden, one flower's in front of the other. I realize I've been making a lot of floral pages, but I'm really inspired by nature. I love gardening and I love flowers, and that's going to come out in your artwork. The happy dandelion flower can go with any floral napkin. If you can't access this one specifically, there are tons of other napkins at Ninny's that would work equally well, and you could do a very similar treatment using this stencil and whatever napkin you have, or a similar stencil that has a floral piece in it. Mix and match. But stencils and napkins make a good pairing. Just adding some of the green color, painting the stems here. Adding color over top of the napkins. Remember, you don't have to leave it exactly. You can just decoupage it down and leave the colors as they are, or you can tweak them by adding your own layers of color or shading. I want the butterfly to be a little more upfront, so I'm adding a wash of the blue on top of it, just to make it stand out. And now I'm using my angle brush and using the floating acrylic technique, and I'm shading around the outside edges. The finishing of the page has begun. And I like having it framed. And now I'm adding the same shading on the stenciled areas as well as on the napkin. On the napkin, some of the shading, it's darker in the middle, you can see that. And I want to mirror that on my florals, my modeling paste florals. My background is looking a little flat, so I just want to add a little bit of stamping, so I'm adding some white. This is also adding texture. Get it where you don't want it. You can easily take it off with a baby wipe because everything so far has been used. I've used acrylic paint and it's permanent. Then I decide I need to add some white splatters. And again, if you get a glob somewhere or get it somewhere where you don't want it, you can come in with a baby wipe and lift it up before it dries. You do need to take time after you splatter to make sure that it does dry though. So either set it aside or use the heat tool and dry it. There I'm adding a little bit of blue. Again, introducing that blue of the butterfly into the background. Now I've got some leftover paint on my glass media mat, and this is a fold-out page that I'm going to turn into a mini zine. And I decided I'm just going to have a blank one here, and I'm going to add colors to it as I have leftover paint. So I'm spreading the color in the different quadrants or different sections of this folded paper. And I have several blanks there that I can, if I wanted to, put all greens on one page. I'm in the process of making a garden sentiment pack, playing with fonts and sentiments. And I just wanted one for this. Everything blooms. Here's some close-ups of the finished page. Give me a thumbs up. Leave me a comment. Share this video and my channel with your creative friends. As always, happy creating.